Hello everybody, Dokkan Assets here. Today we are back with another animation analysis video, and of course earlier today we took a look at Namek Goku's animations from the worldwide celebration last year, and now we're going to be taking a look at the Emperor of the Universe, Mr. Full Power Frieza's animations. Of course, not only is this a great time to take a look at these with the worldwide celebration just around the corner, but of course a lot of the stuff from this current worldwide celebration that we're looking at on the screen has been used in the countdown and the marketing for this year's worldwide celebration. So I figured this was as good a time as any to take a look at these animations for analysis. So let's go ahead and watch these through. Of course, as per usual, we take a look at these animations in the regular speed one time through before we give them the old slow down. Now, obviously, with both Goku and Frieza, both of their animations really stand the test of time quite well, and especially, considering the fact that they're both just a year old, of course, it makes sense that they're not going to be as aged as some of the older Dokkan animations in the game, right? They still look really, really good to this day. Now, I will say, there has always been something interesting that I've thought about Frieza versus Goku. Now, I feel like Goku's animations have a lot more movement of Goku himself in them, which is very interesting. Maybe that's just because that's just how Goku rolls, right? He's a lot more nimble, I suppose, than Frieza, especially considering, I guess it's ironic that later in the Cell Saga they talk about how when you're big and bulky and Super Saiyan grade 2 or 3 or whatever it is, you can't move as much, and Frieza's almost in the same boat in terms of his muscle mass. But it is going to be interesting to see how these look. So let's go ahead and start off with the beginning here. Now, I do really like that they did this sort of antithesis type of thing where the intro is the same for Goku and Frieza. Now, of course, it's not an intro animation. This is almost like a precursor to an intro animation, funny enough, considering how it's just this staring them down, right? And then, of course, it cuts to their card art right away. But this is really cool that, of course, for Namek Goku, they have the same posing with Frieza, of course, looking down at Goku here, and the flip-flop for Goku himself. So this is really cool with, obviously, the both of them standing there, and the same lightning strike, too, which is pretty neat to note that that happens in Goku and Frieza's Super. So it's almost like they're kind of happening at the same time for that introduction, right? And it's almost like one is what if Goku struck first, and the other one is what if Frieza struck first, or it's maybe sort of a thing like, what if Frieza won, or what if Goku won type of thing, right? But it's really cool that they do this with both of the animations, and the lighting effects, I think, look really, really good too. I think that they did look a little bit better on Goku, but that's also just because the way that Frieza already is, and also seeing the purple shoulders basically all white is kind of cursed. I'm not gonna lie. So, of course, we immediately go into the card art, and I was talking about this before in the Namek Goku video. This might be an example of an essay where it is one of the quickest going directly into the card art out of any super attack in the game. So we, of course, have the fade to white before cutting in to the foot on the ground here. And I gotta say, this looks really, really nice with the way that Frieza is about to shoot off the ground here, right? I think that they absolutely nailed the sort of beginning little like, okay, I'm gonna get ready to fly off the ground, right? A little bit, maybe not like recoil, but almost just like your body preparing for the impact, right? Before actually then lifting off the ground and zooming forward. Again, I will say this was a very common theme in the Namek Goku video. The perspective on this is really cool already. Also a very high quality asset for sure. But of course, I know that might be weird to say, Frieza's toes, a cool perspective, but that is absolutely the case here. It's definitely a very cool shot that sort of gives some emphasis to Frieza flying forward for this, right? So we have the cut to white and a very cool impact frame here, again, to sort of emphasize how hard Frieza's jumping off the ground, breaking it in the process, and flying forward towards Goku with a little bit of minimal, excuse me, that's a tongue twister saying that so fast, a little bit of minimal movement on his arm here. It is interesting that it expands a little bit, like the asset almost zooms in. I wonder if that's because since it gets so close, like right here, right before it actually pulls back. Maybe that's why they do that, but it is kind of weird to see it just go whoa, 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 whoa. Also, Frieza's entire back actually increases, for that matter. That is definitely a little bit strange. So we have Frieza whip his arm back, which looks kind of choppy in the frame by frame, but of course in full motion this actually looks really, really good. With the then fist flying forward towards Goku here. This is super sick. Obviously having the fist fly by the camera before smashing into Goku here. Now what's cool about this is that Goku also had a similar shot to this, right? Where the fist sort of went past the camera, the head went past the camera as well, and then you are kind of watching the fist fly by the camera. But this is a completely different way that they did it. Not only did Goku's actually show his face, whereas this is sort of a side profile of Frieza, right? You're almost having the camera planted on his shoulder. You actually see his arm and his fist whip by the camera with this effect here, which is super, super neat. I really cannot recall an essay where something this, like, close happens. I think, funny enough, the LR Super Saiyan Force has something kind of similar when Goku kicks towards the camera, but it's definitely not as this in your face as it is with this animation for sure. We have Goku getting hit back here. Funny enough, they do this sort of goofy zoom thing that I talked about in Namek Goku's video as well, where it almost feels like those Bollywood movie effects where they go not as heavy on Frieza though, for sure. I do have to give credit where credit is due, though. I know I'm usually one to talk smack about the sprites because they stink so much, but the aura around Goku here actually does not look too bad. It's flowing very nicely, I have to say. Okay, so we now have Frieza grab Goku's face, right? And here's the thing about this. I really like this animation, and I think that it looks cool, and maybe some of you know what I'm about to say. But the sprites, bro. Like, here's the problem with these, right? Because the sprites are so limited, it's hard for them to find sprites that fit for every situation. Because if you're unfamiliar, this is literally the sprite when you get KO'd and you smash against the screen, right? Like you break the glass of your phone screen when the KO is on the screen. It's just twisted and at a different angle that it's kind of hard to tell. And of course, Goku's face is covered up by the hand. But because the sprites are so limited for these characters, they have to make do with what they have, and it ends up giving sort of an awkward position to the enemy character. And of course, the size is a little bit off. It doesn't feel exactly how it should in terms of the like size comparison between Goku and Frieza here. But again, that is not really a knock on the animation itself. That's just sort of the sprite at play here. So we have Frieza grab Goku's cranium and of course pull it towards him. Again, with how the sprites work, you also have this weird effect of Frieza's hands not really matching up with Goku's face all the way as he pulls him back. Funny enough, at the end, they actually disappeared. You can see the sprite there. This shot just looks extremely funny to me. I don't know why. So you have Frieza's arms. The way that they do this is that they have the asset of Frieza's arms layered over the enemy sprite, and then you have Frieza's head behind the enemy sprite, so you can kind of give this effect of grabbing the character. Now, the unfortunate thing about the way that the sprites work and the way that it's coded is that here, of course, the arm that you see more in frame would be covered in aura at the moment. But of course, because the way that the game works, they can't really program it to do it like that, unless I guess they maybe added like another aura on top of that. I don't know. That would definitely be a little bit weird for sure. But nonetheless, right, Goku grabbing Frieza's face, it definitely feels, or Goku grabbing Frieza's face, Frieza grabbing Goku's face, I'm sorry. We have a immediate knee to the stomach here from Frieza, which this shot is super quick and a super quick cut as well. But I honestly think it works to give this a lot of impact. And as well, then that whole section where, you know, you're having the hand on screen in front of the sprite, you can't really like notice it as much because of course it's such a quick movement like that. We have Goku fly backwards with Frieza teleporting in front of him. And this shot looks pretty good, I gotta say, with Frieza looking here. His body looks a little bit contorted, but I mean, it's because it's full power Frieza. He looks disgusting as it is, right? Also, his expression is very funny here, but I feel like fits pretty well. So we have a very nice background change too. Obviously, with it sort of zooming so quickly, it gives you the illusion that even though Frieza isn't really moving, quote unquote, right, in this animation, it makes it feel like in the full movement, especially. Let's get that on the screen, right? It looks like that he's actually moving super quickly with how fast the background is moving behind him, which is a really cool way to do flying, especially when a character is in more of a quote-unquote static pose, right? It isn't the same as when the character is flying towards the camera, but this definitely feels a lot more natural than some lesser essays when a character is supposed to be flying and it kind of just looks like their PNG is sitting there suspended in the air, right? So that's pretty cool. Obviously, we have Frieza wind up for the punch here, which this is super neat. And you know I'm going to talk about this considering I talked about it in the beginning of this animation. Obviously, as Frieza moves forward here and teleport, they do this really cool perspective where they have Frieza's fist fly past the camera. Not only do they focus on it here for just a moment to sort of give it that bigger sense of impact and movement, you have this really cool purple motion line shot. Of course, this is supposed to be going past the purple section on Frieza's arm. I love that they focus on that in these animations. It makes these feel a lot more dynamic and a lot more action-packed for sure. And of course, we have the Frieza beatdown, which Frieza looks fantastic in this shot here, I must say. He looks so nice. The coloring and the effects all over him, the fruit punch, the dirt, the dust, the debris, looks perfect to the Namek Saga. We have him give the absolute beat down on Goku here, which looks so good, especially in the full-time speed. This section looks fantastic, with Frieza giving all these nice little punches. Interesting, too, that they also have these little explosion effects that hit the enemy as Frieza is punching. It's kind of interesting to note that they don't really, like, match up super well with the actual punches that are being thrown. Like, they're kind of there, and they're kind of close for some of them, and they sort of lag behind some of the other punches, but they are there, and I feel like when it comes to this sort of thing, it almost gives it more of the effect of, like, let's give it a view in full times real quick. It gives it the view of, like, he's punching so fast that obviously it's leaving the impacts afterward. And not only that, when it's in this really quick speed, it's kind of hard to even tell that they're not exactly connecting with the actual punches here, right? Now, of course, we get a beautiful, beautiful zoom in shot of Frieza here throwing the punches down on Goku. And this is so cool because this is obviously like a first-person perspective, which is not something that we get terribly too often. We do get it occasionally in some Dokkan animations, but it is really cool to get this perspective. Frieza looks fantastic here. I love all of the different angles that they take for this, all of the varied punches, right? Everything about this section looks super, super clean. I love the kicks especially as well. Like when Frieza kicks up in the air, this section looks super good. Very, very cool perspective. And then you get Frieza's point of view, which is really, really cool, right? You go from getting punched as Goku to punching as Frieza, which is nice, with these fists flying towards the enemy sprite, just absolutely wailing on him. Even that knee that I'm sure you may have caught there right at the end. Very, very cool. And then, of course, we have another one of these. Bro, they're nailing it with this one. Holy cow. So, of course, the final hit to Goku, right, where we have Frieza's, I don't even know if that's his hand or his foot. I can't tell with the number of fingers that are on there. I think, no, that's his hand. Yeah. So the hand whips around back, right? We have, again, this very nice motion blur effect, whipping it right past the camera. We have a couple of flashes here, right, which sort of emphasize that this attack has hit the enemy because we have spit. I'm assuming that's what that is. That would have come out from the enemy's mouth, of course, being hit by an attack like that. Then we have Frieza's foot. That must have been Frieza's foot, actually. Interesting, because that's what's up in the air, right? Even though it kind of looks like in that initial animation. Let's go back to that. It kind of looks more like his hand, but no, yeah, that's his knee, actually. I see it now. It was weird because I thought this was the pinky and the thumb, right? But he just has one middle toe in the beginning of that. Or in the beginning of that. In the middle of that, rather. Excuse me. In the middle of his actual foot, I mean. Yeah, so it's interesting that you have that sort of, like, impact frame. And then they immediately cut to the foot just kind of being in the air. I'm assuming that has to be spit, right? Like, that the enemy got hit with. That would only make sense to me. And then, of course, we cut to the fist, which then also has a very nice motion effect. I love the zoom in on this, too. I think they absolutely nailed that. And, of course, having it fly by the screen with another impact frame. Yeah, this has to be like spit flying off the enemy. The end of the fist there. And finally, a knee up with, again, a very nice motion line effect. Yeah, a lot of impact here, too. Just looks so good. I really like that the whole way that they did this. Ooh, that's such a raw shot. Oh, that's actually... Huh, I'm going to screenshot that for later. That's actually the countdown image for day 3 of the Worldwide. Interesting. I didn't know where that asset came from exactly. But what I really like about this whole sequence here, because obviously after this we sort of move into the final kick that Frieza gives to Goku here. This whole sequence really gives the emphasis on Frieza giving the absolute beatdown to Goku here, right? They emphasize the punches and kicks so well. They zoom in on the spots where they really need to zoom. They put motion lines where they're supposed to be. They give you these nice zoom in shots where the different limbs are flying past the screen. They give you all these very cool perspectives. I'm burping because I'm apparently so excited by these animations, right? This whole sequence is just so well executed and is easily one of my favorite parts of Frieza's animations for sure. It's just so clean, so well put together, and it really gives you that like, oh my gosh, Goku's getting the work type of feeling, right? That is exactly what I feel like after watching that animation go down. So of course, after all of that beatdown, we finally have this shot of Frieza here that I was just talking about a moment ago, where we have a little bit of a zoom into the camera. This is quite menacing, kind of spooky to be honest with you. As well, very cool that they actually include the fruit punch, because sometimes Dokkan animations don't, sometimes they do. I know a lot of modern Dragon Ball tends to avoid that, so it's always nice to see it. You have the then zoom into his chrome dome there before zooming back out. Another very nice shot of Frieza. I don't think I've actually ever seen this frame before. This is a super nice frame for this to just be there for 2 seconds, right? And then we have Frieza fly up a little bit into the sky. Again, very cool that his tail is actually chopped off, and you can also see again the like damage on it, right? The fruit punch. Before Frieza begins to squat up for the kick here. Now, I will say with this sequence, one thing that I would say normally about this is like, wow, that's a lot of pose changes all in succession. However, in full motion, it does look, I suppose, a little bit janky if you're really focusing on it. But I think that the movement looks okay, right? It definitely doesn't look too bad when he's moving back to, you know, get ready to wind up the kick there, right? I think it looks all right. It looks a little bit slower, and I guess you could say a little bit choppy, but of course, Frieza was just coming out of a sporadic temper tantrum. So I suppose that it makes sense that the way that he looks in, you know, moving now is very sporadic in that regard. So of course, we now have the part where Frieza actually throws the kick forward, which this part looks really, really cool, if I do say so myself. You have a very, very nice wind-up with that same very menacing expression. Very interesting that Frieza turns here, and this is not the same asset as well by any means. This is a completely different one where he's about to whip his leg sideways. Again, a very cool perspective where you almost get hit by Frieza's leg here, which is pretty neat. And the final follow-through, which looks fantastic. Frieza looks super goofy. Not goofy in a bad way, but just because, you know, he looks funny doing this pose. But obviously the kick looks great. The impact is perfect. And the perspective is very, very nice too, seeing it sort of from behind. As you see, the enemy sprite has some anime motion lines behind them, which, again, I sort of talked about that in a few animation analysis videos where they kind of incorporate this sort of thing in here. When a character is either flying really fast or they're in the middle of a fight, anime will do this. And it's cool to see Dokkan sort of take that in. This part is so disappointing because you don't get to see it. So the land looks nice, the electricity looks fantastic, and Goku, as you can see, flies forward and then smashes into the rocks and the water, but it gets cut off so prematurely because of how quickly it gets dark. But this animation is really, really nice. You have the water effects that look perfect as Goku is smashing into the water. You can see that the island actually crumbles as well as Goku flies through it, right? And what's so cool about this is there's dust clouds now there, and there's dust clouds now trailing the water as Goku flies forward. And you can even see that the water spreads out, and it's a very nice perspective shot. I know it's super hard to see because it's so dark, but it is there, right? So it's kind of a shame. That is the one thing I will say about this animation that always disappointed me, is I really, really wanted to see this in full color, and the way that it, you know, looks in full, especially this final shot looking so nice, but they just cut it so quickly, unfortunately. Okay, so I Frieza. So we immediately go into the 18 key. Let me take a drink of water. Seeing all that water on Namek really got me thirsty. So, of course, this shot of Frieza is really, really nice as this sort of introduces itself onto the scene. We have Frieza screaming his fool head off, which the effects and the stylization of this look so good. This looks like it could be a shot right out of the anime, absolutely. It looks really, really nice. We have Frieza fly forward again, which... no, I don't think that's the same asset as the one where he was sort of flying upward before. It can't be as well because, of course, the lighting effects on this are a lot more reminiscent of him having the key aura around him, which, of course, makes sense because that's literally what's happening in the shot. Yeah, so very cool flying forward shot. Funny enough, this is just what I was talking about earlier. When it comes to shots where characters are flying forward, Dokkan, when they do it right, they do a great job of emphasizing this by sort of have the character growing as well as the aura around them, kind of pulsating almost to represent how fast they're moving and moving forward towards the screen. I also do like that they animate Frieza's tail flopping about there. I don't think that that was even really necessary, and I don't even know if anybody would have really noticed that if they would have just kept it in like this position. But that, again, fantastic attention to detail, and I'm always really glad when they include stuff like that. So we have Frieza get closer and closer to the camera before a very interesting way to transition here. We immediately cut and have this really sick impact frame. Funny enough, it almost looks more like golden Frieza in the distance. But yeah, so we have the fade to white real quick, or the cut to white, I should say, with the very cool aura around Frieza. Is that the same PNG? Yeah, I guess it is. Interesting. The aura doesn't really move as Frieza moves forward until it's a little bit more in frame here, where it sort of flares up, which looks really cool. I actually don't think I've seen this specific frame either before, because I don't recognize that expression too heavily. Wow! That is a really high quality asset. What's interesting about this is that you can tell that the type of thing that they did here was that they had it the same sort of size of the actual image, right, that the body asset is, and they made a specific one for how close the face was going to be, because you can see the quality difference, especially in how pixelated the lines are here. Even just look at the fruit punch on Frieza's body comparatively. This almost looks like censored out compared to how it is here, which of course isn't the case. But it is cool to see that they take that into consideration. And of course, not only does this frame fly by so quickly, and it's not in your face for that long, right? You're probably looking more at Frieza's face anyway. This isn't really something you're going to notice, but it's just something interesting to take note of to see how the game works, right? Where sometimes they'll just use the assets from shots before because they know you're not going to notice them, or they're going to be on the screen for so fast that it doesn't really matter, right? So we have Frieza fly forward and immediately fly up to Goku. So I always thought that this shot was a little bit weird. I don't think that Frieza looks too bad. He maybe looks a little bit stiff there because he doesn't have like any movement at all on his actual body as he's moving up past Goku here, right? I always just thought that this shot of him sort of leaving his aura behind looked a little bit weird, right? Obviously, you have the enemy sprite realizing like, huh? Something's amiss. And you can see Frieza still flying up there. This is a little bit of a different asset, as you can see, because his leg is sort of more down towards Goku's head, right? Whereas before, his leg didn't look like that. And it was more towards Goku's face, right? I don't know. I just always thought that this looked a little bit weird. And especially if this is supposed to be like Frieza leaving his ki behind because he's so fast. I always felt like the ki looked way too small. Ironically enough, it looks comparable-ish to the enemy sprite, but you can even see like Goku's ki, his aura is huge in this shot, right? So it was always interesting to me that this was how they decided to do it, and it looks even bigger here, right? And like in the next frame, it gets so much smaller. I don't know why they decided to shrink it down so much. Just seems like such an odd decision to me personally. And I would have loved for this to be bigger if that's really what they wanted to go for this, which is ironic considering a TFS scene that is about to come up and be referenced in this animation. But we have Frieza open his arm here, which I think this shot is really, really cool, right? Getting his arm out extended to ready the attack he's about to launch on Goku. You see the other arm follow suit. And of course, a very nice shot of Frieza appearing on the scene before throwing his arms forward, right? Which is a very, very cool shot as well. I like how they emphasize him whipping his arms forward. Even though this is a quick cut here, they do a good job of sort of tricking your brain with these motion lines and having Frieza sort of bring his hands together quickly. Very nice impact frames to sort of emphasize what's to come with the blast, right? You have this very cool blast of air, or I guess just like energy. Very, very nice lighting effects on this one. Very, very cool with Frieza's hands obviously lighting up. And some animations have done this, and we've seen them do it a couple times in recent time, but they actually do a little bit of blur on the background to sort of give you some perspective. It looks like Frieza is a little bit farther away, or the camera is focusing on Frieza's hands a lot more rather than focusing on his face, right? Which is a really, really cool effect, because you can see it go from like this, right, where you can see all of him is in frame, to this, where he now looks like, you know, the camera is more focused on his hands. Very, very cool. The only unfortunate thing about this is that the Japanese text, which of course is like the sound effect, right, kind of blocks the hands of Frieza here. I don't know how this looks with whatever sound effect they use on the global version of this, but it is a shame because it is a little bit distracting from how cool this animation actually looks, right? So then, of course, ooh, also, I didn't even notice that. Look at that. It's sort of like, you know, heat waves, where it sort of like tricks your brain into thinking something's wiggling a little bit. That's kind of what it looks like for this animation. They do a great job of that here. This kind of reminds me of like some of the magic users in Dragon Ball, you know, where like their magic sort of looks a little bit wobbly, or like Guldo or Babidi or something like that. It's cool to see that they can do that, because I would think then they could use that for, you know, them. But this is also cool too, because of course this sort of has the implication that you're inside this blast that Frieza is firing off, which is really cool. So we have the cut to the card art, which of course is an exact reference to the scene. And ironically enough, I talked about this in the Goku video, where it's always cool when they do this with animations, where the card art is transitioned from the exact scene that the card art references, right? Just like this. So it sort of feels a little bit more fluid than sometimes in animations where you're like, wow, look how cool this looks. And then the card art pops up and you're like, ah, okay. It makes it feel a little bit more fluid, even though it's obviously stylized a lot differently. But of course, that's just Dokkan's way of doing super attacks, right? So we have the card art appear on the screen, flying to hit Goku, and oh man, this is such an underappreciated section here for sure. So we have the cut to white, and obviously the enemy sprite fly away, but we have the frame of impact when it actually hits the enemy, and you can see it's sort of that same effect where it kind of looks like you're seeing those heat waves type of thing, right? The enemy is sort of like, whoa, whoa, you know, kind of wobbling about, sort of getting this interesting effect on them, you know, again, sort of like magic-esque effect. Looks really, really cool. I don't know why that particular... I just wanted to point that out. Why is that on the aura? Those little couple of lines there. You would think that would be all throughout the aura, because usually auras have that in them in Dragon Ball. But I don't know why it's just in the corner there. But anyway, we have the enemy sprite fly down toward the ground before making impact with the water, which the water actually looks fantastic. Again, it's kind of a shame that the text is blocking it, because I'd love to get a better view in it and not have it be as distracting. But the water effect looks really, really good. Really, really like the way that they do that. Again, a lot of modern animations have been doing this for a while now, and I've been saying this in many animation analysis videos. Like, effects of explosions and water and buildings and debris have looked so good in Dokkan for a while now. It's really impressive that it's just a bunch of PNGs making this. The only unfortunate thing about this is the water below It doesn't really move too much, right? It's kind of the same PNG that's there. I suppose you're sort of distracted by the big explosion of water anyway, but it is kind of a shame that the waves don't really move or anything like that. Okay, so we have a very cool pan up here with Frieza's hands now above his head, obviously cutting from down there, and a very cool way that they have the Ki Blast form, and the lighting effects are so perfect. Oh my gosh. So you have it form in his hand, right? And again, so glad they don't just do the generic pink ball.png. They actually make a specific one that looks a lot closer to how it looks in the anime, right? It looks super, super nice. The lighting effects are great here too. Obviously, they begin to form once the ball is actually completely there, right? Looks super, super cool. And now, of course, this is the scene I was talking about. Bigger, bigger, bigger! We have the ball instantly pop very, very giant. Frieza's hands also moving to compensate, right? You can see that Frieza's dome is now a little bit more orange, which of course makes sense because the light reflecting off of it looks like that. And we get this side shot of Frieza where I will say his hands look a little bit wonky here. Like I feel like they should be more open palm and flat rather than this like curled finger kind of look. But it's not going to matter because of course in an instant the blast gets bigger, right? You can see all these very nice key effects coming off of the ball, right, as it expands. A very nice, almost like dark shadow around the ball, too, which makes sense. This shot is so good with the perspective being right under Frieza with the ball growing and growing. And I love the effect of the clouds as well. The clouds look fantastic. You can also see now the sky sort of turning the same color as the ball as it begins to expand over and over until it's basically taken up the screen. I think they nailed this absolutely, right? You have it now from this perspective here where it gets even bigger to a ludicrous degree with these very great impact frames transitioning in between. You can see it is very big here, and then the impact frame, now it's even bigger and covering this whole top section of the screen. You can barely see Frieza anymore because his energy blast is just so big. But yeah, this looks fantastic. I think they absolutely nailed it. I love the pink gradient as well. Don't tell me it gets bigger. Ooh! That's sick. I do wonder, the one thing I will say about this animation that I was always a little bit confused by was that I don't know if for certain sections of this, like obviously once the sky turns red, it's, you know, pretty clear that it wasn't the section where the sky was green anymore. But this part where the ball grows bigger, right, when the sky is now red, right, here, bomb, you know, gets bigger. I wonder if this is supposed to be that same scene from a different angle, or if the ball literally just gets even bigger than it was in the last shot, right? I don't know. It's not like they do like a poor job of implying that or anything. I think it's just the way that it's cut is kind of like a, not like an optical illusion, but it sort of tricks your mind into wondering which one it technically is, right? Interestingly enough, you also have these little black smoke particles too that are sort of surrounding the key, which is really cool because obviously that gives a little bit more malice and menace as well. You have this very quick zoom in shot to Frieza, which again, the coloring is fantastic. His little purple parts are now orange, which makes sense, of course, because the light reflecting off of them. And then, of course, you have him throw the blast down, which looks fantastic. I love so much about this shot. You have not only a really cool shot of Frieza sort of getting ready to throw it here, right, where he sort of gets this quick movement in and lifts up his foot, but you also have this super cool perspective, right? This is another great way for them to avoid having a lot of moving parts on the screen, where they quickly cut to a zoomed in shot of the character to give you a very interesting perspective. And I'm a-okay with that because, again, more perspectives like this are always welcome. You have these super sick motion lines as Frieza is throwing the ball down towards the planet. And then, of course, you have the final frames here where Frieza is actually launching it. And this part I always thought was super sick, where the ball actually passes by the camera here. I always thought that that was a really, really neat way to do the perspective of this. And I can't really recall many other instances where animations do that, where they have the ball sort of pass by the screen. I know that that happens sometimes with like the Kamehameha, like you see the Kamehameha kind of move past the camera a little bit, but I can't really recall too many animations where when a character throws a key blast, it almost looks like it moves past the camera, almost instead of just like moving around it, I guess would be the best way to describe what I'm trying to say. But anyway, we move on to the blast now, getting close to the Earth. The water effects picked up here because they look fantastic as the ball is colliding with the Earth. Of course, as it, or the Earth, Namek rather, as it finally hits the ground, it's interesting that it expands so quickly, right? You can see, like, quite literally in an instant, right? It instantly gets bigger, which I guess makes sense because, of course, you know, this is Frieza's iconic bigger attack. But I wonder if they do that just to kind of make it impact with the ground faster since it was moving so slow in the beginning, or if it genuinely just got a little bit bigger. But I do like the water effects here as well because they kind of feel like they're moving around the Ki Blast, right? You can see them sort of getting a little bit tossed around. And obviously moving in more accordance with the giant ball that is colliding with the planet here. Looks really, really good if I do say so myself. Interesting that they also cut back to there being no water effects at the last frame. I almost wonder if that's a glitch. Like, I kind of feel like that this frame shouldn't be here, especially being in between this frame and this frame. So it's a little bit strange that this frame is present here. But I guess it's okay. You don't really notice it because, again, it is quite literally here for like a frame. I think it's 2 frames that it's on the screen, so you're probably not going to see it anyway. Maybe it's supposed to be like the water has like now gone down back into the ocean. Maybe that's what they were going for. But either way, we have this very cool explosion effect with the electricity shooting off of it. And again, kind of unfortunate that they fade to black so quick because I really, really like the way that this explosion effect looks. And I think it looks really nice with this sort of very cool shot of space here. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are in the home stretch. Look at your boy Frieza getting angry. So I will say, before we get into it, this is a very interesting shot of Frieza for me. Not only just because, you know, the anger is sort of making him pulsate, which I think is pretty cool, and also looks a little bit weird if I'm being honest, but I guess that makes sense for the giant space alien, right? I feel like Frieza's eyes are very long here. I don't remember if they look exactly like this in this shot, but I feel like they're maybe a little bit too long. That's not necessarily a bad thing, I guess, for this shot, though, because, of course, this is supposed to be a very twisted expression. You know, Frieza's kind of hit his breaking point after fighting Goku for so long. Also, funny menacing text at the top. Oh my gosh, is that a JoJo reference? But we have a quick cut to another scene of Frieza here. Interesting that they don't have the mouth flaps for him, but they did for Goku. I guess in the beginning of Goku's shot, they had him with his mouth closed too, so I suppose that kind of makes sense. We then have this shot of Frieza pulling his arm back. I actually really, really like this section here. It is very, very cool, where he is sort of contemplating everything and deciding what he's going to do, right? It is interesting that they have it cut from just his arm and then zoom out to his face, right? It's interesting that they don't like show any other perspectives of him or anything like that. And I feel like they also could have, if they were going to do this way, they could have zoomed out instead of just having it cut immediately, right? Like, and then maybe have like an impact of like, dun-dun, you know, like I've made my choice type of thing. Yeah, because you can see Frieza's now talking with the mouth flaps here. His whole body sort of pulsating. By the way, again, gotta give credit where credit is due. The stylization of Frieza here looks fantastic. He looks really, really good. He looks basically ripped right out of the Namek Saga. So, looks fantastic there for sure. Okay, so we now have a cut to his face, which, again, the very long eyes here is interesting. I feel like they're not this long in the anime, but again, maybe I just haven't seen the scene in a little while. However, this shot is really, really nice looking. It just looks super good. You know, definitely no complaints from me on this. I really like when they do close-up shots like this. And the cool thing about this whole animation that you'll see, especially as we continue too, is that he sort of tries to mirror Goku's animation, right? Where you have that first shot of Goku, and then you have the second shot of Goku, where it sort of cuts to him in another shot, where obviously there's a little bit different with Frieza's arm there. But, you know, then it goes to a, like, close-up shot a little bit later. Kind of the same thing. It sort of gives you the same feeling of this, right? Obviously, sort of in different steps. I love this shot, by the way, of Frieza's expression, lifting up his head, and then, of course, getting the final breaking point expression. Looks super, super good, if I do say so myself. We now have this beautiful shot right here. This is easily one of my favorite shots in the whole animation, right? Where we have Frieza get ready to fire the blast, right? Pulling his arms back. This snappy movement, I think, works perfectly for this animation specifically because, of course, he's like, you know, in the way that he's about to launch it. Perfectly executed, I feel, with the right spots where the whips in the perspectives and the poses are perfected as well. This is another underappreciated thing I think about this section of the animation, right? You have this, which was obviously in one of Goku's animations too, with the sort of perspective of the ground changing, right? You have this very, very small perspective change where Frieza is going from sort of up top here to a little bit more of a side angle. That is super cool that they included that. And finally, you have the flash of white too. Oh man, this shot looks so nice. This literally looks like a screenshot right out of the anime as well. Very, very nice looking, if I do say so myself. As well, the Ki Blast forming in his hand looks perfect, right? You have the little ball appear there, and you have it grow little by little before, of course, you have it completely expand and envelop. Again, the lighting effects look great here. The anime motion speed lines in the background look good too. You have the cut to Frieza launching the beam forward here, which is a very cool perspective as well. And of course, this being a sort of alternate universe where Goku loses, you have Frieza's beam actually win. But they also do something interesting here, where this is sort of the same thing as Goku's when Goku was inside the beam or the beam was coming. This has to be something that was in this section of the anime, or it's supposed to be like that type of thing where it's like the anime speed lines or like the dramatic lighting that's not necessarily actually there, right? It's just for dramatic effect as the light sort of creeps up to Goku here. You have it instantly envelop him in the purple ki, which looks fantastic, if I do say so myself. And again, you have this really cool effect, just like Goku's animation did, where the character actually gets enveloped in the aura, right? And you can see them slowly begin to fade away into the energy blast. Really, really cool. And again, the way that they have to do this is so impressive that they make this work so well, because they have to have assets that basically like have holes in them or cutouts, so then you can see the sprite and the actual particular, you know, assets obviously just appear on the screen to sort of make it feel like the enemy is getting enveloped in the ki, right? They absolutely nail it every single time. It looks great. You have this really cool explosion effect at the end here. It looks super nice. Frieza's coloring also looks great here, right? The light sort of shooting out from the blast point as well looks really, really good too. And you have this very twisted expression on Frieza's face for the KO screen. And that is it for Frieza's animations here. I will say the one thing that is interesting is obviously with the Youfool, Goku's hair is sort of flowing in the wind, and Frieza doesn't really have any movement on him here. I don't know what they would have done for him specifically, because obviously he doesn't really have anything that would move, maybe besides like his tail flowing back and forth. But it would have been kind of cool if maybe this shot like continued off of this one, right, where Frieza was still in the light and like the light was sort of bouncing off of him rapidly from the explosion, you know, being right in his face and him staring at it, or maybe like dust particles flying on the ground from the explosion making contact with the enemy. That would have been cool, but nonetheless, this is still a very nice looking KO screen for sure. So that is Frieza's animations completely analyzed, ladies and gentlemen. These look really, really good. I like both Namek, Goku, and Frieza's animations quite a bit. I think they will easily stand the test of time for years and years to come for sure. I will say, if I do had to pick, and I don't really like to make it a kind of competition, but I suppose with dual units like this, it is kind of interesting to see. For me personally, from a technical standpoint, I think that Goku's animations look a little bit better. Not only is there a lot more movement of the character, Frieza has a lot more static shots of him specifically, right? So Goku's are maybe just a little bit more interesting to look at, in my opinion, right? I think that it also may just be a little bit biased, since I like Goku better than Frieza in terms of liking them in general, not from a technical standpoint. But Definitely let me know in the comment section which set of animations you like better. I think that they both look really, really good for sure, like I said. And one thing that I think they both really drive home super well is they capture the aesthetic of the Namek Saga so well. That sort of animation style and the look of the iconic Frieza versus Goku battle is captured perfectly in these animations, and that's so impressive to me considering the limitations that they have with literally just being able to use moving PNGs, basically. Dokkan is absolutely killing it out in these streets, and I cannot wait to see how Cooler's animations look. I'm hoping, and this is no knock to Frieza at all, but just because I hope they're good, I hope Frieza's animations are absolutely blown out of the water by Cooler's, because I hope Cooler's are just that good, right? It'll be really cool to see what they end up doing with him. Haha, no pun intended. But that is going to do it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will catch you in the next one. Dokkan Assets out. Peace.